So I operate by the golden rule, number one, with the caveat that I am also still running a business, right? So
yeah, for sure.
If I have a tenant that hasn't paid the rent in 3 months, if I was in that situation, would I want to lose my housing? No, but at the same time, like if I'm not paying my mortgage, then the bank's gonna come after me, right?
Welcome to What Matters Media Barber Chair Talks, where we strive to inspire people to be better people. I'm Matthew Baker, and today we're talking with Joshua Youpa. Josh is a real estate investor and property manager. It was cool hearing his perspective on how to stay financially free, as well as all different types of topics. We kind of just trimmed up his hair, gave him a nice cleanup as he grows his hair out. So tune in, it's gonna be awesome. Thanks for joining us on What Matters Media, where you matter. Thanks. How you doing, Josh?
I am well. Good to be here, man.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Yes.
So Josh, I met you when I was a plumber.
My man.
Way back
in the day.
In probably like 2012 or I don't know. It was a while ago.
Yeah.
Because I graduated high school in 2014. So it was between 2014 and somewhere in there.
That would make sense.
But, yeah, and you at the time were, I think, strictly doing property managing for a local company?
So I bought my first property in 2008.
Okay, cool.
But I've been kind of juggling both ever since then.
Gotcha. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So I guess, starting out, I back in 2007, 2008, I was looking for a house to call my own. I'd been renting up until that point. And I was kind of posed with two different options. One was a ranch home that would have strictly been a single family residence. And I had the option to buy a 4-unit apartment building. And while it's probably not the best way to go about things, I was operating from a position of scarcity. I had just kind of moved into a different role at work. I became more of a property manager versus construction.
Okay.
And I wasn't quite sure how that was going to work out long term.
Yeah.
And the idea of having to foot a mortgage myself scared me.
Yeah.
So buying a 4-unit apartment building allowed me to live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the first floor and rent the other 3 out, which afforded me essentially to be able to live there even if I didn't have a job, which thankfully never came to that. I actually excelled fairly well in what I was doing, and I love it actually. So it's worked out really well.
Dude, that's awesome.
So the journey has evolved into like acquiring more properties as time has gone by. My wife and 2 kids and I currently live in another house hack, and there have been other house hacks between that 4-unit and the one we live in now.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a journey, but it's something that I prescribe to wholeheartedly. I wrote a book on the topic of house hacking.
Oh, nice.
It's called Home Free. It's just an ebook on Amazon.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it definitely could use a revision because I've learned a lot since the time it was written.
Yeah.
But
so if you want to hear the unrevised one, go download it now.
Yes, right.
If you want to wait.
But yeah, I think it's, while money isn't everything, Zig Ziglar used to have a saying that, money isn't everything, but everybody needs it to survive. So it's something that we all deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it's, something that I'm passionate about, just, being a good steward of the money that I am given.
Yeah.
And, my wife and I both are big proponents of living by that mantra.
So she's pretty much backed you pretty well with with your projects. Were you married when you first started that?
I was not married when I first started.
Okay.
But when she came into the picture, she saw the vision.
Yeah.
And, if my wife wasn't as understanding as she is, obviously she would not have allowed me to, buy us a house hack to put us in.
Yeah.
Because we'd actually been in a really nice 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house.
Oh, wow.
That we both figured we'd be in for a long time with a pull-out back.
Yeah.
And when our daughter was coming, my wife started talking about not wanting to work anymore. And I was
in the traditional sense.
In the traditional sense, right? She wanted to stay at home with the kids, which at the time I was looking at as more of a vacation for her, which I now realize is like not anything I would ever want to do, right?
Yeah.
So once you have kids, things definitely change. At the time, I was super resistant to the idea because my wife was making as much as I was at my job.
Yeah.
And so we were essentially going to cut our income in half. And the happy medium for both of us was, well, if we can get rid of this mortgage by house hacking somewhere else, I'm willing to take that step.
Yeah.
And now that we have done it, I mean, if you're financially able, your kids being home with their mom is, or dad, if that's the situation.
Yeah, whichever side it is.
I mean, I don't think there's a better way for kids to be raised, obviously. I mean, who better than their parents?
Yeah.
So we're just blessed to be in a financial position to allow that, to have that kind of a lifestyle. And my wife, for the most part, loves it. And I love that she's there because it allows me for, a little bit extra flexibility since I am kind of juggling a few things all at once. So she's unfortunately the one that kind of is the backup plan when I get called out.
Yeah. Now, so you said you kind of came from a scarcity mindset. Was that because of kind of how you were raised as from your parents, or was that something just from the culture around you, or where'd you kind of pick that up, you think?
So definitely upbringing.
Okay.
I came from a single income household. My dad worked for 29 years for the same company. And with 1 year left before he could retire, the company basically, everybody went on strike. It was during union times. And my dad essentially lost all retirement after working for a company for 29 years and kind of had to put the pieces together for the next 20 years of his life. And I never wanted to be in a situation like that. So, I mean, I think it definitely was a familial thing. My parents never liked debt either. So, paying things off early was always a priority. And that's something that I've adopted on my own as well. Yeah.
And how do you because I think that whenever I have debt, which I try to stay out of as much as possible, besides some school and some car stuff.
Right.
But I know anytime I get into any sort of debt, even if it's a teeny bit compared to some people's, it's really brings anxiety on. Did you always feel like you were good with because of how you saw it from your parents? Do you feel like you always implemented it well in your life as a teenager and growing up?
Yes, as best as I could. I was always the kid with Christmas money that could never figure out how to spend it because I wanted to get the most bang for my buck. So, many times I'd go into a store and never actually purchase anything.
That's funny.
But growing up, I mean, I always tried to pay things off as fast as I could. 5-year car loans were paid off in 2 years. And now, thankfully, again, we're blessed to be in a situation where outside of debt that's tied to an asset that's creating income or cash flow for us, we don't have any debt outside of that, which is, again, we're blessed to be in a position like that.
Yeah. Now, I would love, because I'm curious, to hear a little bit more about how would you define home hacking, and how would you talk about what that looks like if someone's wanting to get into something like that?
I mean, so most people, they have 3 giant expenses, right, throughout their life, and it's going to be their housing, their car, and their food.
Yeah.
So anytime you can reduce the cost for those 3 things, you're getting ahead. And housing generally tends to be the most expensive one.
Yeah.
So house hacking can look a lot different for different people. You can buy a big 5-bedroom house. You only need one of them and rent the other 4 out to friends of yours. You can buy a multifamily property, which is what we live in. We live on the 2nd floor. We have a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house upstairs, and then downstairs there's a 1-bedroom apartment. The rent that comes in from that 1-bedroom apartment pays my mortgage, taxes, and insurance.
Dude, that's amazing.
So we live there for the cost of utilities. When I lived in the 4-unit, the rents that came in there actually covered all the expenses, and I essentially lived there for free.
Wow.
My wife and I used to live in a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on the other side of Hamburg, and that was a very similar situation. The garage apartment in the back paid for the mortgage, and we covered the taxes and the utilities. So, I mean, it looks different for different people. You can do a single-family house. It's all by itself with an apartment above a garage, maybe, which was that 3-bedroom that we lived in.
Yeah.
You can live in a multifamily if your wife is willing to put up with it, which mine is. Or, if you're younger, a guy like you could buy a 3-bedroom house and rent 2 of the bedrooms out, Alex could be one of those people.
There we go.
And those guys are getting a discount. They're living in a great house. They're paying, a third of what they normally would be. You have roommates. You're not living by yourself. They can help you cover not only your mortgage, but your, housing expenses.
Yeah.
And you're kind of splitting it up, and they're helping you out.
That's pretty cool.
You're the one building equity over time.
Yeah. And with what you do, I've known you to be a person that you at least strive your best to be a person of integrity in what you do.
Yeah.
How would you say that you stick to that in some of the stuff because I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't have very good integrity in the housing industry,
right?
Or in the investment industries. How do you kind of manage that for yourself?
So I operate by the golden rule, number one, which would be, do unto others. And with the caveat that I am also still running a business, right? So
yeah, for sure.
If I have a tenant that hasn't paid the rent in 3 months, if I was in that situation, would I want to lose my housing? No, but at the same time,
there's consequences.
If I'm not paying my mortgage, then the bank's going to come after me, right? So
yeah.
The golden rule is number one priority, and as long as both sides are holding up their part of the contract, things move seamlessly. It's when generally on the tenant side that part of the contract isn't upheld, and then
in your case,
correct, right? Because on my end, I think my tenant, I have a lot of long-term tenants, and I would attribute that to the fact that we really do care about the people that live in our buildings. We try to be at their beckoning call. When somebody has a problem, they're not waiting long for a resolution. And I've heard horror stories from tenants that ultimately end up in our properties that have dealt with other subpar landlords.
Yeah.
In the area. So
yeah. And I know that when I did plumbing, there was stuff that was just normal issues that were taken care of right away.
Right.
That it wasn't something there's different people that have experiences where it's 2 years in and you're like, well, this problem's still going on. And I don't know, do I fix it myself? Most landlords would say no, obviously.
Right.
But if it's not getting fixed, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So even having that security from a landlord's incredible. So
part of that, selfishly, if I take care of a property well, it's been my experience that the tenants then take care of the property.
Yeah.
If I show a disinterest in the problems, not only do they feel neglected, but then they may neglect the property also.
Yeah.
So if I create a culture of when a faucet's leaking, I want to know about it and I fix it in 2 days, versus they call me, nothing ever gets done. The next time the toilet's running, they don't tell me and I get a water bill for $1,000. It just, I think it works out better for everybody staying ahead of all of those problems.
Yeah.
And like yourself, at that time, I don't do a lot of the work myself, so I've surrounded myself with good contractors to solve those problems for me.
Yeah.
And that, without good contractors, you can't run a business.
For sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And something I think that is something about business that is different than a lot of other things, or even a way you'd run a church or run a nonprofit, is you can make decisions that are helping yourself and helping the person.
Right.
And it doesn't make it any less good
right.
that you're doing that.
Right.
I think it's cool to notice, okay, this stuff is better. And this one guy actually, we talked to Joel last time about this guy, Jeremy Bardwell. And he said one time in a podcast I was listening to, he's like, what's good for people is good for business. And I think that was such a important quote that I realized, or when he said that, it really has stuck with me. It's like, wow, it's just, there's so many businesses that don't run that way, that they're so short-sighted in their thought process that they're trying to be good for themselves and they're actually causing struggles in their business or their marriage or their family,
right?
Because they're not separating it well, or they're not delegating well, or they're tied too closely to the outcome, or all these different things. But when you're actually serving in my in my thought process, serving your employees first, so that your employees serve your customers well.
Right.
Then from there, you have a kind of team that's building a brand more than just, or a company more than just a job, more than just a project, but it's actually building the whole thing as a unit.
I agree.
How would you say like you've gone about like choosing the right people for your team?
So in my business, I don't have any employees. Everything is subcontractual.
Yeah.
So plumbers like yourself, electricians, carpenters. Ultimately, it comes down to if project 1 goes well, we move on to project 2.
Yeah.
Unlike an employer-employee mindset where if things don't go well, we have to work through it.
Yeah.
I just don't call the guy for the next job.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Overall, though, I'm not sure how I've attracted the people that I've attracted, but the contractors that I've been working with for a very long time. If I need something that I don't have the basis covered for a contractor, one of the other contractors will refer someone. And that I didn't necessarily, I try to be personable with my contractors, because I genuinely care. I want to know about what's going on, in their life. Like I knew you were going to be a barber, pretty far along the way before you actually made the jump to do it, just because we would have those conversations when you were, replacing a hot water heater or what have you.
Yep.
So, I try to stay, my main general contractor is getting married the end of the month, and I'm going to his wedding, right?
That's cool.
Because of the relationship that we've created. So
yeah.
Not only do I care about the people that are living in the properties, I care about, the guys that are working on them as well. So
yeah. And ultimately, like when you're taking care of those people, like and some people will say what they need to say for their own ego. They'll try to say, oh, something's fake or whatever. But when you just genuinely care about people, you can be like, well, it doesn't really matter what those people have to say about that.
Right.
Like, I'm just going to be who I'm supposed to be. Like you said, the golden rule, do unto others as you would want them to do to you. And it's really such a interesting thing to see how many people don't do that in what they do. But yeah,
it's a pretty easy rule to stick to,
Yeah. There's not a lot of other things to go around.
Right.
But no, that's cool. And you said you have, how many kids you got?
2.
2 kids.
So I have a daughter that is turning 4 the end of next month, and I have a son that's 17 months old, going that's on so like cool. 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. And that's really cool just to see how you incorporate, how you were saying earlier, your family into what you're doing.
Right.
And something that I think is really important is obviously, like, we're wanting to inspire people to be better people here, but through all of our lives, there's so many different aspects to what we're doing, whether it's spiritual, physical, emotional. Like there's so many things we have to make, decisions we have to make, and with our families and all those different things. How would you say, like, legacy? That's something that I really love. Is how would you say that you try to instill legacy, even as your kids are pretty young and you can't really be talking to them about doing a home hack?
So just on the tactical side of things, my wife and I this year actually set up a trust awesome. So that our assets are protected in the event that there would ever be if something would ever happen to me, something would ever happen to my wife, or something would happen to both of us. Yeah. My wife and I, we didn't joke about it, but it was something that would come up. If we're going out on a date and the kids are home with the babysitter, God forbid something happened to us, our kids weren't covered. So
yeah, for sure.
We put a trust in place that if something would ever happen to both of us, there's a trustee that would manage all of our assets, so that our kids are taken care of and they get distributions at some point. More so when they're older, but college and things of that nature can be covered. Yeah. But it's less about the finances that they would potentially get. I don't want to give my kids money. I want to give them a mindset that, I kind of had to learn on my own and from mentors along the way. My parents gave me the basics for sure, right? Taught me to save, I mean, I grew up in church, and you know, I was brought up in a very safe environment.
Yeah.
That my kids also are experiencing, if not more so. And but I also want to give them, you know, a financial education and you know, an education in sales and education in marketing. Like those are all things that they need to operate and function in. I mean, the world today, and I'm sure moving forward.
Yeah. That's cool.
I mean, my kids essentially are my legacy.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought of it beyond that stage, but
Yeah.
again, it's not necessarily the finances, it's just equipping them with all the tools as they move into their chapter of life, which thankfully is a ways away. But the learning process for that starts, you know, my daughter is slowly learning that she can't just get things that she needs, but my wife is creating this environment of like earning it. You know, if you want we're going to put up a chart, and you need to feed the dogs every day or make your bed every day, right?
Yeah.
And so that stuff starts as early as now.
Yeah. It's easy to see like how a job works with that type of stuff.
Right.
Well, that's cool. So I think we're kind of close, especially since we're just kind of cleaning up this haircut. Is this kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, let me show you in the mirror the back, and we'll see what we're going for. How's that looking for you?
Oh, man. Looks good.
Sweet, man.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we'll just kind of finish up here. But one last question. What is one piece of advice you would give, kind of looking back at your 14-year-old self, what would be a piece of advice that you would give him?
So I think patience is something that I didn't have growing up.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's all going to work out in the end. I think that there is definitely something to the drive that I had when I was younger, and I still have. But patience never was at the forefront. I mean, I was always a pretty impatient person.
Yeah.
But I think enjoying the journey along the way and having a little bit of patience would be my number one priority. And number two, I mean, I spent money on stupid stuff when I was younger, I guess, and it would just be kind of trying to instill the idea of, you know, assets over liabilities, you know, as a young kid.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to get a hold of you, Josh, and kind of hear what you do or look at your book or those types of things, how would they kind of get a hold of you?
So at Josh Youpa on all the social platforms, and then at my website actually is joshyoupa.com.
Nice.
That's YOUP as in Peter A.
Nice. Sounds good. Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely.
Sweet. Say it again.